Okay. All right. We're on. We're on the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ross, and with me tonight, I have with me Dr. Shafer Stedronova. Did I say that right?
You
Sted-
know, there's like the Americanized way to say it. And so I go by Dr. Shafer. It's the easiest thing. And I go by Stedron and Stedronova because actually in the Czech Republic, we add the ova. But when you have a name like mine, you go by a lot of things. Dr. Shafer works great.
Well, I'll refer to you as Dr. Shafer. So that's cool. It's cool for me. Cool for me. Uh, Dr. Shafer, you are a physician, life coach, and an author, and you are a podcaster. You're juggling a lot. You have a lot of big titles. But before we get to your titles, I want you to talk to me about what gave you such a drive to achieve so much. And I know we
Mm.
talked about this briefly in our initial interview, but I want you to just go over what 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 made you become such an achiever that to push hard to be the best you can be, sort of deal.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think it's a twofold approach, one, and twofold answer, because why did I become a physician? Well, I became a physician probably for the reason that many, if not most, physicians become physicians. And one, you're a giver and a helper. That's something that you want to do with your life. And also, very often, you're the kind of person that you're wanting to achieve something, you're trying to prove something, right? You're trying to prove that you can do enough good in the world, or you're trying to prove maybe to a parent or someone in your life that you're smart enough. There are lots of reasons why we chase these titles. And when I heard you saying like, wow, there are these interesting, achievements and titles, it's interesting because I think many of us, we seek money or accolades or titles early on in our lives. And once we get those, it's pretty easy to see for most people that that doesn't necessarily enrich our life experience. They're just titles, and they're not the things that make life worth living and full of passion and love. And so for me, on my journey, I achieved these titles, and I still had a lot of unfortunate things in my life that were in part nurtured by the same parts of me that were able to seek out those titles, that were able to get through medical school, very grueling, residency, very grueling, very challenging.
Mhm.
And the things that set you up to say, no, it doesn't matter how many hits come my way. I will bounce back and I will do my best, and I will show my patients and I will show the world that I can do this. Those are often the same characteristics that might set us up for enduring certain things in our personal lives that are not only unnecessary, but they're not really helpful on our journey of really leaning into our passions. And
Mhm.
so for me, once I had all of these titles, but I was really faced with the dissonance that you feel when your life is out of alignment, when things just aren't what you know in your heart they should be. I had to come to this reckoning of, I need to reclaim my story. This
Mhm.
isn't my story. And once I started doing that and adding to my titles, as you laid it out at the beginning, yes, I was a physician, I was a mother, but I added on things that were always a part of my life, but I wasn't necessarily brave enough, or I didn't have the time and energy to really pour into. I
Mhm.
started writing. I started writing music again and performing music again. I started writing for the podcast and producing the podcast, writing books, stories, children's literature, and then working on collaboratives like a book that I worked with Jim Britt on recently. And when I started doing that, instead of losing or leaching out my energy and my purpose like I had been before when I was seeking those titles, seeking approval, trying to be enough, once I understood that I was enough, And I really decided who I wanted to be and who I was. And I leaned into that and stopped
Mm,
wasting my time and energy on the titles
mm,
and the achievements that other people maybe wanted for me or that I expected to try to please others. That's when I had this incredible amount of energy to
mm,
really do the work that I'm passionate about. And that's where my children's literature focused publishing house, Little House of Dreams Publishing, was born out of. And
mm.
that's where the books are coming from and the podcasts come from. My podcast, Talks with Dr. Shafer, and I also produce one that's based on children's literature called What's Up, Young Authors. And
Okay.
it's easy when you see everything to say, wow, it's too much. Why are you doing all this? But I'm so passionate about when we are really leaning into our story, our energy. It does feel limitless. We have to be choosy about what we sign up for, and we have to get comfortable with saying no and really only leaning into what is in alignment. But
Mhm.
that being said, when you are living in an alignment, the energy you have, it feels often boundless to me.
Mm. And you know, a wise man told me that if you do what you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. And at first I didn't get it, but after doing this podcast for a while, it started to click. And it's like, wow, I don't feel like this is work because this is something that I love to do. And I'm not doing it for clickbait uh, or likes or whatever. I mean, it's cool, but I'm doing it to spread a message to the masses and to to share uh, to share the thought that it's okay to not be okay. And
Mm.
I want people to understand that not just through my story, but through others, and for those that are working with those that need to hear that. So that's to me, that's what it's all about. So
Yes.
so let's talk about you becoming a life coach. Now, you're a neurologist. So what made you turn the page and say, I want to do something different other than what I'm doing. I mean, let's turn the page and let's do something a little different. Why life coaching?
You know, the reason I started life coaching, and, I think there are some similarities and differences between life coaching and therapy. I have a degree in psychology, double boarded in neurology and psychiatry. So there's a lot of overlap there.
Okay.
However, certainly in medical school and in, a psychological education, you don't learn how to coach. It's a different approach, but having the neurological basis, understanding how our nervous system works, it sets you up to be a really well-informed coach because it makes it all make so much sense and it's easier to operate within the regulations of coaching, which are very different from how we would approach a therapy session, for example. So for me, I was already primed and I think I had a good background. I had left an abusive relationship and I was in a point in my life when, for safety reasons, I was very isolated. I'd become very isolated over the years, and especially in the years leading up to the separation
Hmm.
of that relationship
Hmm.
by necessity. And then when you're in what I call that messy middle, when you're leaving a situation like that,
Hmm.
often that isolation gets worse before it gets better. And it's wise to be very, very aware of who you share information with and who you're trusting, because it's just a really, really tricky time. And it's really important to reach out to people who will understand you and will truly hold space for you and not set you back on your healing journey, or not unintentionally make you less safe than you already are feeling or already are. So what happened to me was I was very isolated. I had, changed numbers, wasn't leaving the house, and felt like no one would know what I was going through. And what was happening was women were somehow finding my number and reaching out, texting me, calling me. And these were women that I didn't even know personally.
Hmm.
And they were finding through someone, through someone, through someone, I understand from this person that you could help me, that you have experience in helping me navigate this sort of situation, reaching out, asking for support, asking questions.
Right.
And it was just naturally occurring.
And
And
this was during your domestic violence
this was during the
years.
isolation after leaving. This
Oh,
was during
after.
the extreme isolation
Okay.
after leaving for
Okay.
safety reasons.
Sure.
When
Sure.
again, I
Sure.
didn't have the same number, I wasn't out in the community, and somehow people were managing to find me and reach out. And so I was supporting them and doing all of this not as a coach, just as a person with the background that I had. And my closest friend and confidant at that time, I said, what is it that I'm doing? What's the name for what I'm doing? Because I love this. I get so much fulfillment and enrichment for holding this space for people, but I don't even know what to call it. It's
Mm,
not being a physician, it's not being a therapist. And so then I did research. And I found the Jay Shetty life coaching program and had some wonderful conversations with people who work in the program. And I realized this is it. This is what I'm doing. And by virtue of that and listening to podcasts about coaching, I realized this is what I want to pursue. So I pursued that certification program, which was absolutely life changing. And I wish every physician would have access to one, coaching for themselves during training, because I think that would be really wonderful, and
mm,
how they approach their own training, their own lives, but also how they understand the individuals that they come in contact with professionally on their team, as well as their patients and their families.
mm,
I think it would be wonderful also if we had the opportunity to learn what coaching is during medical education, because I think it would add a layer of connectivity with patients that isn't trained. We aren't trained on that in medical school. So I went through this program, and I took something that was happening organically, and for myself as a physician, I want to do something the right way. I want to make sure that I'm not causing harm, but I am actually helping someone and doing something the right way. So I was
mm,
so grateful to be able to go through that certification program to make sure that I was in fact providing services that were helpful to people. And I not only learned how to be a good coach and a good support to clients from that experience, but I also learned so much about myself, and I healed so much. So it was an incredible
mm.
experience, and I'm so grateful to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, as a coach, what area, uh, what do you help your customers with?
I know a lot of people like to be very, very niche.
Mm, mm,
As you can tell from, me, I'm a musician and physician and author, and I do kidlit. I also
oh,
do a lot in domestic
judge,
violence and abuse.
you judge, yeah.
I don't think I'd be very satisfied just being very, very, very niched. So for me, I certainly work with people who have a history of domestic abuse and domestic violence. And I think it's really key, if you're coming from that space, to work with someone who is not necessarily a victim themselves, but they have understanding and education, and they're trauma informed. That's really, really important. So I'm very passionate about doing that. Um, I also, again, organically, what has happened often is fathers of victims of domestic abuse have sought out my services. And that was very
Mm,
intriguing to me, because a
mm,
part of when you start coaching,
mm,
it's like coaching itself in general. My job as a coach is not to come with an agenda. I come with tools and resources and an open heart and connectivity. But if I come with an agenda, we're going to follow my agenda, and we're not going to really help the client, right? We're not going to help them achieve what they're looking for. And when we're finding the place that we fit, it's really interesting to stay open and see what comes your way. And you learn so much about what you are bringing out into the world when you're open to the reaction to you. And so it was interesting to me to have fathers of victims often reach out to me. And a third group that I really, really enjoy working with are businesses, often small to medium-sized businesses, especially in, the medical and dental fields, and helping them with team building and coaching as a group because it is so incredibly important. And so many programs are really leaning really heavily on, the idea of burnout and, pizza parties and high fives and a board with nice things written on them, but not necessarily really getting down to the tangible details that if we understand these issues in our team and our business can lead to actionable change that will make our days go better, will make us more efficient, and will help us sell more products, et cetera, because we're working better as a team. And I love the opportunity to work in these systems and help raise the awareness and improve the team building capacity. That's one of the things that I find really rewarding with coaching.
And you said something that hit me when you mentioned that you work with fathers
Hmm.
of domestic violence survivors. These are the dads, right? And you don't see a lot of that. You know what I mean? This is the first time I've ever heard someone mention that they work or counsel the dads
Mm.
of the ones that were abused, because, and I'm just keeping it real, the dads that I grew up around will be hunting the ones that abuse their daughters. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm.
But to hear that you counsel men whose daughters been through that, I would have been less surprised to hear you say that you counsel men that are trying to do better with themselves in terms of domestic violence. The ones that are trying to change their lives and
Mm.
not be the abuser, but to hear that the dads of the abused, that's a wow moment. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, what is that like to talk to a man about their daughter? I mean, that has to resonate a little bit different.
Yeah.
Or am I just tripping?
No, absolutely not. It surprised me as well. And that's why I mention it because it was really interesting to me when it organically happened. And I think it's really important. We all have something unique to offer in whatever space that we're working in and operating in. And that just goes even when you just go to the grocery store and you smile at someone, right? You're doing good work. You are setting a mood, you are helping someone with just really small things we do every day.
Hmm.
And when you recognize what do I bring to spaces? What do I bring? And how can I be in alignment with myself and make sure that it's important to me that when I enter in a space that I leave things better than when I got there. I never want to leave something worse, right? That's something that's really, really important to me. But to do that well and to be proud about my evolution in that, okay, well, what am I bringing to the situation? And for whatever reason, there is this there is this response to what I'm putting out into the universe. I talk a lot on Talks with Dr. Shafer on my podcast about domestic abuse and domestic violence. We talk a lot about coercive control. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about that is because as a neurologist, you have patients come in and let's say they have seizures or they have headaches, right? These are neurological disorders that have a biological, structural, often reason why they're occurring. And there are some modifiable risk factors that we can talk about, sleep and diet and the trigger avoidance.
Hmm.
And then there are things like medication. A lot of our medications only work about 30-40% with regards to lowering, let's say, how many headaches someone's having a month. And you as a physician, it's there's an art to medicine. It's not just science. And so when you have seen enough patients with headaches, you see someone and you say, okay, this is fitting this pattern. So I'm going to prescribe topiramate, or I'm going to prescribe whatever medication it is because I think that this is going to be really effective for this patient. And so you go over the titration schedule and everything they need to know and the side effects, what to expect.
Mm,
And you try the medicines, and even though everyone is following the best orders that they can about how to take their medicine and how they modify their lifestyle, et cetera, things
mm,
aren't getting better.
mm,
And I saw that so often with things like headaches and seizures, et cetera. And people were coming in, and they would often, in neurology, it's not unusual because when you see a neurologist, things are often quite challenging. You know, you don't see a neurologist over something small.
yeah.
And often people did come in with support with spouses or with parents, often, or with their grown children if they were in their later lives and they'd bring caring grown children with them. And often the sentiment with a small percentage of people was, you know, they're just not getting better. And now as a physician, you ask the lifestyle questions, right? You ask about sleep and tobacco use and alcohol use and stress and safety in the home. You ask. But the reality is, we know that patients don't always answer those questions completely, right? Or sometimes they give part of the information, and that's not because they're dishonest. That's because, just like in anything in life, you're building a relationship. They may not be ready to save that, to share that information with you. Or there may be someone in the room that they don't feel comfortable sharing that information in
Mm,
front of. But you don't even recognize that it's a sensitive issue for them. It might be something like drinking, and you ask, how many drinks do you drink in a week? And they say, oh, you know, they may edit their answer a bit, and you don't
mm,
even recognize that they're editing for the person next to them, right? There are a lot of reasons
mm,
why, when you're first getting to know someone early in that patient caregiver relationship, patient physician relationship, where you're getting information, and we know it may not be all of the information, right? We recognize this, and studies have shown that.
okay. I have a
When,
question.
mhm, yeah.
Oh, I have, I'm looking at my chat and there is a question
Oh,
that was
yeah.
posted, so I want to read this to you. And it's concerning the fathers of
Hmm.
AV victims. What is a frequent question or concern that the fathers of DV victims ask or express?
Yeah. A concern is an overall concern, and I think this translates to just most people who are seeking coaching in general. Because a lot of our problems, when they're distilled, they all come from similar limiting beliefs or issues. Is this feeling of control? What did I do? What can I do? Right? Those are often themes. And there are so many barriers between how they're feeling now and how they want to feel, what they're doing now and what they want to do to help their child, right? Because this is a grown up that they're concerned about, but it's their child, and they're feeling really out of control, and they're feeling really unsafe about how they support them and how they love them.
Mhm,
And to your point earlier, you know, they their first thought may be to throw blows.
mhm.
But we know that that's most often not going to be a solution to the problem. It may actually be a part of the problem. We know that women, for example, who are physically assaulted, sometimes when they fight back, when they're, you know, in a provoked state, they can be the ones to go to jail, right? So we don't want
Mm,
anyone thinking that
mm,
physical
mm,
violence is the
mm,
thing to turn
mhm.
to.
Yeah.
And so often when they're in this feeling, I have all of this adrenaline, right? My nervous system is telling me this isn't safe, this isn't okay, but she's staying.
Mhm,
What do I do? Or this isn't safe, this is okay, this isn't okay, she left, but he won't leave her alone. What do I do? Supporting them and getting them into a place where they're regulated helps them be a better support for her,
mm,
which she desperately needs. She doesn't need a dysregulated person supporting her because, again, as we said earlier, when we're on our healing journey, we have to be really careful who we reach out to, really choosy about that, because we're in a delicate state. It's a fragile, vulnerable place, and it's really easy to get some advice or well-meaning support that actually sets us back, right? And so we don't want someone dysregulated trying to be the support. We want to help them get to a place of regulation and help their child also join them in that.
And all this is good information, but it leads me to talk about generational trauma.
Mm.
During our initial conversation, Dr. Shafer, you mentioned that you experienced some things, and you also experienced in recently that you went through a DV situation. You have a daughter. Has your daughter at any time ever expressed her feelings to you about what you went through? Number one.
Mm.
Number two, has she ever exhibited any feelings or reactions to the things that she saw?
Mm. You know, I don't want to share too much from her
Sure,
perspective because that's really her story to
sure.
tell. But I think, going back to, it's really incredible when someone who's not in the thick of it is the one reaching out for help, because
Mm,
that
mm,
shows a lot of, you have to, it's tricky because some people reach out for quote unquote help because they're trying to control. Right.
mm,
And we see that.
mm.
We certainly see that, especially in situations of domestic violence. So we have to be cognizant of that.
Yes.
But the person who's reaching out because they want to learn how to be a more supportive person, right? They're not reaching out because they're like, I need you to change this person in my life.
Mm,
That's not my role and that's not their role. When they're reaching out because they want to learn how to be a better support, that's that's where it's really wonderful and amazing, and that you can have a really big impact on their life, and
mm,
very likely they will then be able to pour what they've learned into the person that they want to help, but in a different way than the course of controlling. I'm going to change your behavior, right? That's not your role. So I think, I don't want to speak to
sure.
her personal experience, but I started talking about the fathers again because we experience things as a family system.
Mm,
We're all experiencing it at the same time, and everyone's experiencing it from their own perspective, from their own stage of development. Everyone's going to have their own recollections. And so for me, I just always try to really lean into not fixing her feelings about things, but just trying to understand her and be in that space and give her a place to be heard. And because I am very intentional about this and about making sure that she understands that it's a space where she can ask for what she needs and she can be honest if something happens in a discussion that she doesn't like, if something is said and she says, well, maybe you didn't mean for that to feel this way, but this is how I experience it. Because we have a very open dialogue between one another, she's able to say, if I fall back into fixer mode, because let's face it, I'm a physician, I'm a mother, like we all sometimes knee jerk reaction, try to fix things.
sure.
If I knee jerk reaction, try to fix something for her, she is, she at 10 and 11, she was starting to learn how to not be a people pleaser and not just, take it in and follow someone else's instructions on how to live her life. She was already able to say, hey, I actually don't need you to tell me what to do, but I really do need you to listen right now. I love you. I know
Mm,
you're not trying to control me, but I need you to listen right now.
mm.
And I'm so grateful for that, because I hope that means that I'm doing my job as a parent.
I think you are, and it's good too that you're able to catch the signals that she's giving you. Like, hey, I just want you to listen, and you're consciously making yourself available to do that.
Mm,
Whereas some of us uh, think that we know it all parents, we may just brush it off, or we may push them to get it out, which would in turn, in some cases, make them close even more
mm.
because they're not ready to share.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so
Exactly. No agenda, right? Like we said with
right.
coaching, no agenda. And I will say, because I think, so much more is caught than taught when it comes to everything in life, our relationships, but especially our young children.
Hmm. Hmm.
I am very intentional. I'm remarried, and I'm very intentional in my relationship with my husband, with her stepfather, to say, you know, if I'm feeling like I'm not being heard or I'm being instructed, because, he and I have talked about this, like there's a certain amount of misogyny that's kind of baked into all of us. Women, men, that's just cultural, right? And we all can fall into saying things or acting in a certain way that's maybe a little too domineering over the women in our life or whatever. And sometimes we just need someone to say, like, hey, by the way, that's this is how this feels to me. Is that what you want me to feel? No? Okay. Well, when you take a step back and hear that, what do you think about that? Is that okay? No. And when it comes to listening, it's the same thing. When I'm trying to just speak and I don't want it to be solved, and I'm getting solutions, and I'm feeling that nervous system trigger that's like, oh, this isn't what I want right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Old me would have swallowed that and felt resentful because it would have happened over and over again. We wouldn't have talked about it. New me says, hey, I love you so much. I know you're excited and you want to help me, but like, I really just need you to listen right now. And I say that respectfully and kindly in
Right.
front of our kids,
Hmm.
because they need to see that it's okay in a relationship to say, hey, I love you. I know you're well intentioned, but I need to get this off my chest. I know it's hard. I know you want to fix it for me because you love me, but like, I just need to talk about it. We need to model that
Hmm.
real life stuff in front of them, and not just the everything's fine. I don't react to anything. I don't question anything because everything's fine. No, that's not how real relationships work. And so I'm very intentional about modeling that in our relationship too,
Hmm.
with, of course, good boundaries,
Hmm.
and being, always appropriate about what your children experience. But I think your children do need to, I think they benefit from seeing a level of openness and being able to challenge one another in respectful ways.
Hmm.
Because if they don't learn how to have that respectful conversation, they're learning it on the playground, or they're learning it in college and it's not going well, and it
Yeah.
could put
Yeah.
them in a dangerous
Hmm.
situation.
Yeah. And it's funny you talk about solutions, because that was my next question about how do we break the cycle.
Hmm.
And and I mean, you mentioned it, like communication. You got to be open and
Yeah.
be able to listen to your kids and share with your kids. But I think another thing that we could do is create a new model for ourselves, and that goes into reclaiming your story. We have to remodel ourselves so that
Yeah.
we can be better versions of who we are for our kids. So, Dr. Shafer, how did you reclaim your story?
There are so many things. So I have a tool that I really love to use with people when we're starting at the ground level, right? They have that feeling of, I'm out of alignment. I recognize there's a problem,
Mm.
but I also feel like I'm kind of stuck in the mud. My tires are stuck in the mud and I'm just spinning. And in part I'm spinning. Why? Because I just keep going in the same direction over and over, and I have no traction here. And it feels like I can't move and I'm stuck. But if we zoom out from the car in the mud, there's the whole earth around the car in the mud. This is just one moment in time. And we need to use different tools to get out of the mud, and then we can go wherever we want to go,
Mm.
right? We
Mm.
can move, but we have to get unstuck we're not going to get unstuck using the same tools, using the same momentum. We have to stop and change our momentum. And so the tool that I really love using when we are feeling stuck in the mud, like I was feeling stuck in the mud, is something that I call the butt wheel.
The what wheel?
B-U-T, the
Oh,
butt
oh, okay.
wheel,
Oh, okay.
B-U-T.
Okay.
And this is exactly why I call it this. Because once we laugh and once we have that moment of, ooh, what is that? Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
get it now. Now we're in a place where we can learn. If we're in the place that we're in when we go to, a PowerPoint presentation about some psychological theory, even though we're literally paying to go to this lecture and we're spending our time, right? We're not in a place to learn. So I'm very intentional about, I want to disarm you before we get to this tool, because we need to be in a state of play and vulnerability for this tool to work. So we have the butt wheel. We're stuck in the mud, and we're saying, for example, let's say we've always wanted to write a book. Let's make it a less emotional instance. We've always wanted to write a book. But our limiting belief is that I've never written more than a page, right? I can't get past the first page. I can't see the story, but I have a story in my heart that I want to tell, right? So the butt wheel, and it's a wheel, right? We can spin it, we can turn it. It doesn't have to keep going the same direction. But if we keep going the same direction with our thoughts, we won't get anywhere new. So
Mm,
I want to write a book,
mm,
but I've never written more than a page.
mm,
If someone came to you and said, nope, you can do it, you're great, here you go, and they gave you a journal, and then many more people, and we just invested in all these journals, we haven't addressed the issue. And now we just have a bunch of journals that are literally making us feel even more trapped in the limiting belief that we can't write this book. And it's not true. We need to change the direction of our thoughts so that we can then write past the first page. And we can do that by spinning that wheel. And instead of saying, I want to write a book, but I've never written more than a page, we simply use what we have already at our disposal. And we say, I've never written more than a page, but I want to write a book. When you even speak that or think that, the feeling you get in your body is one of hope. It's one of a momentum in a new direction, because now the end point of your thought and your belief is, I want to write a book. It's not, I want to write a book, but it's, I haven't done this, but I
mm.
want to write a book. And it's so overwhelming when we know we want to make these personal development related self-love and growth changes, but we feel that we can't. We feel we have no evidence to show. It's so much easier to use what we have, to use the thoughts and tools we already have, which is our desire, which is our motivation, and focus on that. It's much easier than falling for the schemes of paying to take this seminar that's going to overwhelm me with information that I'm not ready yet to utilize, because in my mind, I still believe I can't do it, right? For me to utilize those tools, I need to really change my mindset first. So I love using the butt wheel to try to help change the momentum of our thoughts, change our focus so that we can achieve our goals. Because our brains are like computers. You can only have one window open at a time. So if the window you look at last is, I've never written more than a page, that's what you focus on. But if the window is, I want to write a book, you're more likely to open up that Word document and start typing. So it's really important that we set ourselves up for success, and addressing those limiting beliefs is a key tool we can use to do so.
Yeah. I have a comment here on the chat. It says, you have to be open and communicate with your kids. I
Mm.
broke that cycle from my parents. People are scared to let their skeletons out their closet. Yeah, we are.
Mm.
We, I think everybody has skeletons. Nobody's perfect. Some
Mm.
people have more skeletons than others, right? And our skeletons can sometimes come back to haunt us. It can
Mm.
haunt us in our behaviors. It can haunt us in how we look at the world. It haunts us in how we perceive relationships, right? It's those skeletons that we have to confront in order to be
Yeah.
better. And that's the work, because that's hard. Because confronting your skeleton, so to speak, as the chat here says, is confronting those old demons, those old wounds. You're challenging yourself to look at those events and say, you know what, I'm not going to give you power anymore.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Because they have so much power over you when you try to work around them or ignore them. Because every
Absolutely.
time you open that closet, the skeleton is like
Hey,
falling
right
on
here.
you. It's falling on
Surprise.
you
Yeah, it's
because you're
yeah.
hiding it. Whereas if you take it out and you sit with it and you're like, hey, I really don't like you being a part of my life, but if I ignore you, you're just going to keep falling on me. Let's do this. Let's
Yeah,
figure this out. Let's see if I can put you to rest
yeah,
because you deserve a final resting place that's not in my closet falling on me. And
man.
I deserve to be able to just go get dressed for the day and not carry this burden and this reminder with me all day. Because when we try to ignore things, when we kind of put it up on the shelf and try to ignore it, it doesn't get smaller, it doesn't go away. And in
Mhm.
fact, it's just triggering our nervous system and leading to dysregulation throughout the day. So if we can learn to, when we feel those fears, I call it the trigger detector, like when our nervous system is a little or a lot triggered and we get those fight or flight sensations by certain topics or experiences, lean into that fear. Imagine that fear is trying to give you a message because our nervous system, it's not dysregulating us for no reason. It feels that there's something that we need to deal with here. And if we treat that as a message that we need to learn from, a lesson, rather than seeing it as something to be afraid of, then we can start to deal with those skeletons. And I liken it to, so it's a trigger detector. It's kind of like a metal detector. You're on the beach, you've got your metal detector. If it beeped, would you drop it and run away? No. You would dig because it's literally telling you there's something really important there. So if we can lean into what our nervous system and its ancient wisdom, because our fight or flight system, this is the ancient part of us. This isn't something we learned on social media or, you know what I mean? This is the ancient part of our nervous system that's there to keep us safe. And it's telling us, ooh, this doesn't feel safe. And often that's translated into situations that even are not truly unsafe for our body, right? But maybe when we were children, this conversation would have been unsafe. And we needed to make sure we responded in a certain way.
Mm,
And now, when we're out in the world, in the wild, and we're having these conversations that are similar, and they lead to this nervous system dysregulation that's really harmful for us,
mm,
distracting from our purpose and from us just living a happy, healthy life.
yeah.
If we keep engaging at that same level as we did when we were a kid, when it's not actually going to cause us physical harm in the moment, but it is harming us
Mhm,
because our body is having this response, that is a missed opportunity for healing and
mm,
just living a happier, healthier life. So when you feel triggered, learning to acknowledge the trigger, learning to see those patterns, and hopefully working with a coach or with your therapist, whoever you're most comfortable with, whatever meets your needs, to try to better understand your body's relationship to those triggers so that then you can start working on diffusing those. They're kind of like bombs set off because they are destructive to your body, and you deserve to start diffusing those bombs and not walking around with a hair trigger. You deserve to feel better and not be triggered to that degree.
Understood. Understood. And that goes to me asking you about your podcast.
Hmm.
Can you go into a little depth about your podcast, uh, what it's about, and how it helps people?
Yeah. It started out really focusing on mindset and me using my experience in neurology and psychology and coaching and music to try to tackle some of the things that are behind our limiting beliefs and give some mindset shifting tools to listeners. That's where it started. And then I started interviewing guests and started having them share their stories of how they reclaimed their life stories
Mm-hmm.
and started really writing in their own books, right? Living out the best life for
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Because it's interesting, my story is uniquely mine, but it's not an anomaly. So
No,
many people
it can
are
relate.
living, yeah, they can relate. They're living these lives out of alignment. And it becomes more and more painful over time.
Mm-hmm.
And then something happened that shocked them into a sense of being more alert to the fact that they had agency, but that they needed to retrain themselves, as you were saying earlier, retrain their minds to really reach out for, to believe they deserved that agency, to believe that they deserved to live their own life and make those choices that led to them living now in alignment and building their life. And the thing that I love that I see about my life and I see about the kids that I've worked with who write their books
Yeah.
and the adults who come on my podcast and my clients is that once we shift, once we get what we think is selfish and start looking inward instead of just pouring outward our whole lives and start doing that work and start living in alignment,
Mm.
it's simply incredible what we can do with our energy and the stories people tell. And you hear it just over and over and over again about how life's biggest challenges set them up to be the people that they always wanted to be and to do the incredible things in the world that they're doing now. It's so inspiring. And I'm so passionate about sharing that because I want every time I put out a podcast, I really hope at least one person, but I hope it's more, at least one person's going to listen to that and decide, okay, you know what? No, today I am going to choose my story.
Yeah.
I'm going to make one small because we got to make reasonable bites when we're on this journey. It's a big thing that we've got to digest when we make this change.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to make a step today and tomorrow, and I'm going to hold myself accountable to showing up for me and living my story and see where it takes me. Because if you listen to my podcast, you just hear over and over again the same thing, which is once we reclaim our stories,
Mm.
that's when the magic happens. Incredible things happen.
Indeed. Indeed. And real quick, you also have an online community.
Yes.
Talk about we don't
Yeah.
tell our stories. Is that it?
Yes. Yes, that's something that I'm building, and it's very much in the beginning stages. And I would love for your listeners, if it's something they're passionate about, to reach out to me. And I'm very open to ways that we can build this community. Because as we discussed earlier, it's so important to have contact, access, resources that are truly supportive when we are trying to reclaim our stories. And we don't tell our stories. Again, it's kind of like the butt wheel. I try to be, somewhat provocative in the way that these things are phrased because I want to get your attention. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to hear we don't tell our stories and think, well, that's ridiculous. Why don't you tell your stories? And then we're here to say, exactly, it's ridiculous. But look at how many people are living this way, afraid to be themselves, afraid to tell the truth about what they're experiencing, because as victims of abuse, which is really what this community is about,
Mhm.
you are often shamed, which is shame is a completely useless thing to evoke in someone and a horrible tool, very abusive.
Mm.
You are often shamed for telling the truth. The person who abuses you is quite rarely shamed for what they did to you. The victim is often shamed for speaking up and for even putting the abuser at risk by sharing just simply what happened to them. And so it's important that we don't listen to that shame, that we surround ourselves in community
Mhm.
with people who will say, it doesn't matter what they say. Anyone who's trying to shame you, that's just a coercive control tool. It's not the tool of a reasonable person.
Mm.
So, or a healed person, I should say. And
Mhm.
if you find that you're using shame a lot, that's a wonderful opportunity to look at why and what patterns. You talked earlier about generational trauma. What patterns did you experience growing up or in your nuclear family often that led to this becoming something in your toolbox?
Mm.
And maybe consider just what would life look like if I got rid of that tool, because it's a destructive tool. It's not going to form any connections with people in my life.
Mm.
No one ever learned anything from shame other than this isn't safe. I need to try to avoid this feeling in the future, but they didn't learn or connect from shame. So that's what the community is about. It's creating a shame-free space where we use things like songs, podcasts, books, poems to provide a space where we can feel that community. We can feel that, oh, it's not just me. Oh, when I see that happen to someone else, I recognize that it's not okay. And that gives me a little bit of a push towards understanding that I deserve to be treated with respect, that I deserve freedom, that I deserve to embrace my agency. And so that's the idea behind the community. It's growing. And I would love people to connect with me and follow on Facebook and on Instagram as I share
Mhm.
clips and music and things and comment and form that community.
Dr. Shafer, I have to say something uh, to address what you were saying. And there's also a response here in the chat.
Mm,
As no one really believes the lady initially.
mm,
There is a lot of brokenness going on in our nation. Uh, there's a lot of generational trauma that was left untreated.
mm,
We're seeing, we've been seeing the end result of brokenness, trauma. Women are crying out and no one's listening.
mm.
Men are crying. Men are,
Yeah,
there's men that are going through this too.
yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, do not sleep on the fact that men are being abused too.
Mm,
We just don't talk about it. It
mm.
happens. There's so much brokenness going on in this world, and we have to fight the good fight to help people break those cycles. And
Yeah.
doing what you're doing, doctor, is awesome, and I applaud you for that because you are doing it from firsthand experience. You've been there. You've been through the isolation, through the shame, through the through the shoulder shrugs. I don't know, because
Mm.
you've been through it,
Yeah.
and you were able to reclaim your story, and now you're helping others reclaim theirs. It's a battle because we need to reach as many people as we can. We need to convince people to speak up and speak out.
Mm.
And therein lies the issue. There's so many people, men and women, that are afraid to share their story because of the shame that they carry. We it seems like people are on cruise control. We don't,
Mm.
nobody has to say anything to them. It's like, you know what, they'll be all right, but we have to continue doing what we're doing. We have to continue to do the work, continue to share stories, continue to send good messages to the world and to let them know that it's okay to not be okay.
Mm.
That's one of the messages that I send often. It's okay to not be okay, but do something
Yeah.
about it.
Yes.
We got to
Do
do something about
something. Yeah. Do something. And that may look like just getting through today, right? Some days that's just brushing your teeth, right? Some days it's just staying in this world and calling 988,
it. Yeah.
right? Some days that's doing something, right? And that needs to be applauded. That's going to look different for everyone every single day, myself included. We have the days where we can conquer the world, and then we have the days where we feel stuck and we need support.
Mhm.
But I think it's really important that as we've discussed today, we do the self work because that's all we can control is ourself and our thoughts. And we can at least make sure that we are not poisoning our own well.
Ooh. Ooh.
And then we need to make sure that if we are not in a place where we can grow, it is our duty to ourselves and the world to go where we can grow.
Mm. Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
And those are really difficult things, not poisoning your own well.
Mhm.
It goes back to what you're saying about there's just so much
Mhm.
dysfunction in the way that we interpersonally relate, including with ourselves. And it needs to be addressed because it's hurting everyone. You know, Misogyny hurts everyone. It doesn't just hurt women. And that's why we need advocates like yourself who speak up and are advocates of women, who are men, who say, this is hurting men too, right? Because there is value in personalizing this for someone so they understand the reason that they need to care. Because if someone is being hurt, whether it's over their race, their social class, their gender, where they're from in this world, if someone is being hurt, that hurts everyone. And if it doesn't hurt you today, it will hurt you tomorrow. So we all have to care and we all have to do our best. And that will look different on different days. But we have to do our personal best to be good, caring humans. And if we are coming at this world from an unhealed place, a lot of that doing our best starts with healing the self first.
I always say, how can you help others when you can't help yourself? How can you love other people when you don't love yourself? How's that possible?
It's not.
Your cup's not even full, and you're trying to fill somebody else's cup. Stop it. Take
Yeah.
care of you first. Take care of you first. And everything else will just fall into place. And Dr. Shafer, how can people contact you?
Oh, I would love it if people contacted me through my website, drshaferstedronova.com. And it's really easy to find me. If you Google Dr. Shafer, Talks with Dr. Shafer, you can find all of our social media. We're on TikTok, on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as Shafer Stedron. And so you can find me anywhere. And I really hope that the podcasts, the clips, the other projects that I'm working on will be a support for you. And you can can also find We Don't Tell Our Stories on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook as well, and be a part of that community. I would so appreciate having interaction in that, because we just need places to share our stories and to feel seen and heard. And my hope is that through Talks with Dr. Shafer and We Don't Tell Our Stories, I can do my small gift to the world to try to help create that space, but I can't do it alone. I need people to join me and interact and be a part of it too.
Dr. Shafer, it has been a pleasure and an honor to meet you and speak with you about this topic, because we need to help people reclaim their stories. and in doing so, we need to do the work to maintain our story.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? We need to maintain our story, but we can help others reclaim theirs.
And thank you so much for the work that you're doing and spotlighting others' stories and living your story out loud and what you share and your vulnerability. It's really beautiful. Thank you so much for doing your work.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I appreciate that. My name is Mark Ross, and this has been another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. Remember, self-care is important, so please make your mental health and your physical health a priority. Do it every day and do it first. With that being said, good night, everybody, and good night, Dr. Shafer. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
All right.